Okay, so dear all, thank you for joining us for this Creative Tech Seminar, which is the third of this academic year. For all of you not yet familiar with our work, we are funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and our mission is to grow the evidence base and address industry and government's priorities for the creative industries, while at the same time advancing research into the longer-term challenges and opportunities facing the sector. Now, since June 2023, the center is hosted by Newcastle University in partnership with the Royal Society of Arts. Now, the seminar series showcases cutting-edge research and aims to foster dialogue across academia, policy, and creative practice, with each session delving into fresh research like today. I'm honored to introduce today's speaker, Camille Pedersen. Camille is a PhD fellow in economics and business economics at Aarhus University in Denmark. Her research combines methodological contributions in statistical modeling and machine learning with applied data-driven studies of decision-making and performance in the creative industries. She has already presented her work at international conferences in cultural economics, and she has also been a visiting PhD researcher, the first ever, and hopefully many more are going to follow after her example at the Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Center, specifically in our London base. Now, in this paper, drawing on a novel dataset of around 2,300 performing arts grants applications submitted to the Danish Arts Foundation, Camille applies large language model-driven topic modeling and econometric analysis tools to explore how formal evaluation criteria and other textual signals influence third-party assessments of artistic projects' eligibility for subsidies. As the first large-scale text analysis of grant applications within the creative industries, the study offers insights into how evaluation criteria are enacted in practice. Now, before giving the floor to Camille, let me first say that this seminar is being recorded. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A session, so please use the Q&A function to pose your questions, and I will then make sure that these questions reach Camille. Thank you for your cooperation, and without any further ado, Camille, the floor is yours to talk about understanding decision-making in public art funding.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming to the seminar, and thank you to the Creative Tech for having me. So this work that I will present to you is my latest work. So it is an analysis of panel assessments of performing arts grants in the Danish Arts Foundation. And I am very grateful for the opportunity to actually work with this material, and I'll also present to you guys. Yes, so let's get started. So the widely known standard rationale for public funding of the arts is that cultural goods generate positive externalities and would be underprovided without any financial support. So without these subsidies, many productions would simply be financially unstable, right? So public subsidies, at least in many European countries, are often distributed as a direct lump sum grant. But because demand by far exceeds available funds, these funding mechanisms often operate as competitive systems, where the governments delegate the allocation decisions to expert or peer panels, so that these panels are operating at an arm's length from the political authorities. So this delegation is at least intended to safeguard the artistic autonomy, but it also makes these panels central gatekeepers in cultural policy. So you can say that the allocation decisions are consequential because they determine which values are societal benefits that are actually realized, through the artistic projects that receive support. Okay, so I have a quote here from a Danish theatre newspaper from 2021 to set the scene for the Danish performing arts context. So it says more than 81 million kroner would have been needed if the Project Support Committee for Performing Arts were to fund all 276 applications, but the money runs out before the talent So this clearly states that there is no shortage of artistic talent or creative ideas in the Danish performing arts, but funding is limited and competition is intense. So I was curious to understand how the funding allocation decisions are actually made. So one key challenge here in allocation is that the true artistic quality or impact can only really be known after production, so after the work has been staged and experienced by the audiences, because it is experience goods. So therefore, these grant applications act as strategic textual signals of a project's artistic quality. So in practice, the application material acts as some kind of proxy for the underlying project quality. So the project proposals, especially, they embed cues about artistic aims and also the alignment with the official criteria. So typically all of these funds, they have some official criteria that are set by the government or by the funding body. But we see here through a stream of qualitative research that takes us inside the panel room, they find that all of these cues are actually interpreted through the lens of the panelist evaluation logics, some interpersonal rules for decision making, some professional pre-justice, ideology, and also the institutional context. So all of this means that the same signals can be read and also valued differently across the different assessors that sits in a panel. So the previous quantitative research has primarily focused on the subject from, you can say, a macro level perspective. For example, the total funding in a country based on some political conditions. But there is very limited research focusing on the micro level, meaning so you're looking at the individual applicants. But the few studies that exist demonstrate, for example, that the funds can be unevenly distributed across different application characteristics, such as the project type or geography. There's also one study that found that the opposition between funded and unfunded projects is only visible when you actually zoom in on the subfields. So you can say that this suggests that institutional definitions of what counts as art shape the funding outcomes. We also have this study here by Lutz, who examined which official criteria set out by the government that actually matters. And she found that artistic quality as a criteria is the overall significant driver of funding success. And she grounds this in some principal agent theory, suggesting that there exists such a relationship between panels and the arts field. So she argues that the experts in a panel often feel accountable to these artistic communities. So this is kind of underscoring what we can say arts for art's sake kind of logic. So I think at least that this opens up for questions about whether something else than the official criteria might matter for funding and competitive arts funding systems, and maybe other textual signals are at play here. So this brings me finally to my research questions for this project. So the overall core concern here is to examine the textual factors that shape success in competitive arts funding systems. So I focus empirically on the Danish Arts Foundation, and my analysis is twofold. So I ask, to what extent do applicants' project descriptions align with the official evaluation criteria? And does such alignment increase the probability of being funded? And I also ask, which additional topics emerge from these applications, and do these topics help explain the funding outcome? So you can say that the first part is kind of confirmatory, so we're looking at the formal criteria, whereas this second part is more explanatory, so what else in application text might have an influence here. And then I also have this a further sub-question that considers whether the weighting of these evaluative dimensions, so both the criteria and also other emergent topics, whether they differ across assessment panels. So given that the central position of the official evaluation criteria it has this central position, right? I think that a natural baseline expectation is that these criteria should be the dominant driver of funding success. So this would lead to my first hypothesis of the paper, that only the Danish Arts Foundation official evaluation criteria exert a positive and significant effect on the likelihood of receiving funding. But at the same time, you also saw that the research suggests that assessment practices can vary across panel and panel members over time. So this motivates a second hypothesis. So the effects of evaluative dimensions on funding outcomes differ across assessment panels. So to answer these research questions, I use performing arts grant applications, and I apply LLM-driven or large language model-driven topic modeling and logistic regression analysis. So essentially, I use LLMs similar to ChatGPT, as you all know, to extract topics from the applications, and these topics then are going to act as my explanatory variables in my regression model, with funding as the outcome. So I summarized a small teaser here for you about the main findings. So I find that some of the topics that reflect the existing official criteria set by the fund, they increase funding success, but not all of them, and some of them even actually have negative effects. So the results also reveal that there are actually 2 non-criteria topics that are positively associated with funding success. And then I also found that the results suggest that these topics effects can vary across the different panels. So the main contribution here of the project is new insights into how evaluation criteria are actually enacted in practice, and whether additional implicit logics or topics could shape the funding. Okay, so the data that I'm working with here is approximately 2,300 applications that are sent to the specific grant program Performing Arts for Adults, Young People and Children. And I have data from 5 years between 2018 and 2024, and we chose to exclude the COVID-19 years. So I have 2 different panels. So one panel made the decisions in the first period, 2018-2019, and one from 2022-2024 was another panel. I got the raw printout from the foundation's online portal as PDFs and a bunch of Excel spreadsheets with a bunch of variables such as, of course, the applicant name, project type, genre, funding decision, of course. But I think what is quite outstanding here is that I got access to all the application material, including the attached files, such as the project descriptions, the CVs, the budgets, and so forth. But in this particular project, I focus on the project descriptions. Okay, so some descriptive statistics here. So over this 5-year period, the funding success rate is about 22% overall, but there is some variation across the years. So we have the lowest funding rate of nearly 16% in 2018, and then closer to around 25% in the later years. And we can see here that the total granted amount per year remain relatively stable over time, but the average grant per funded project actually decreases a bit over the period. And at the same time, there are also more total applicants in the years. So I think you can say that the competition is intensified, but the funds are distributed across a larger pool of projects. Not surprisingly, I guess most of the applications originate from the capital region of Denmark, but this is actually not the region with the highest funding rate. We can see that all the regions are fairly represented in the data, I would say, but with varying funding rates. And I think that it is quite interesting here that the project classified as others. In this case, it mainly covers nationwide projects actually, so they have the highest success rate. And it's very high compared to the others, so nearly 39% here. So who are the applicants to this program? So most of the applications come from organizations registered with a company number or CVR number, and they also have a considerably higher funding rate compared to those applying as individuals. In terms of the theater category, you can see here that the vast majority of applications are from what we call independent artists or groups. So this is self-organized companies and artists, and a few applications are from district theaters or municipalities. But I think it must be noted here that I was not able to distinguish between how large or established these are, because they actually range from solo artists, small, newly formed groups to very well-known theaters in this independent artist group. But I think, yeah, this diversity is somehow, yeah, reflected here in the applied grant amount, so how much they apply for in Danish kroner. So most applications, as you can see here, fall toward the lower and middle end, meaning small and medium scale projects. But there's also a pronounced right skewed tail here with projects applying for up to 2.5 million Danish kroner. Okay, so who are their target audience? So you can see here that most projects have adults as their main audience. But what I think is quite interesting here is that we can see that projects that target all audiences, meaning that they try to appeal across different age groups, they actually have the lowest success rate, around 11%. So this might suggest that a clear audience focus may be advantageous. The data here also cover a broad range of genre categories with a quite high variety in funding rate. So we can see that being contemporary circus and object or animation theater here seems to be an advantage, while you can see here at the bottom, development and text-based, they receive frequently less support, right? So this could reflect something about the artistic priorities by the fund. Then here, finally, you see the distribution of word count for each project description. So the length is ranging from around 250 words to more than 2,500 words, but they are typically around 1,000 words. So that's a couple of pages. And you can also see here that funded applications tend to be slightly longer than the unfunded ones, but the distributions are largely overlapping. Okay, so let's move on to the method that I used here. So to analyze all of these project descriptions, I use large language model-driven topic modeling. So in general, the purpose of topic modeling is to identify or extract the underlying themes in large collections of text. So this is traditionally done using models like latent directly allocation, which relies on word co-occurrence patterns. So it is grouping words that frequently appear together. So although LDA has been widely used, it has some severe limitations, I would say. So the topics that it produces needs to be manually interpreted and manually labeled afterwards. And the method doesn't capture sentence level meaning, it just looks at words. So normally here, the outcome would be a list of keywords for each topic, and then it is up to the human to label the topic based on what can be quite disconnected keywords, I would say. So instead, I turn to a large language model-based approach. So this is a very new literature that has just started to emerge. And here it is an LLM who read the project descriptions and create topic labels and descriptions. And I would say that this allows the topics to be more semantically rich and also directly interpretable for humans. And another pro here, pro is that the natural language can help steer the use case to where you want it, because you can control the LLM using a prompt, but this can also be difficult, right? Because it needs to be able to use good prompts. So the researcher needs to be able to do that. Okay, so here you can just see an overview of the LLM pipeline I developed for this study. So you can see that it consists of 3 different agents or LLMs that works sequentially. So first here, agent 1 is for topic generation. So the LLM loops over all the applications, and then for each application, it defines the topics that it sees in the project proposal. Then it matches them against an existing list of candidate topics. And if there is a topic in the application that is not already on the list, then it generates a topic and adds it to the list. So afterwards, all of these generated topics from agent 1, they are passed to agent 2 for topic refinement. So this LLM is prompted to perform semantic merging so that it clusters overlapping topics into fewer merged topics. And then finally, the third step here is topic assignment. So this LLM iterates over the applications, and for each application This LLM provides a score for each topic, which are the ones that I'm going to use in a regression. So I have also tried here to visualize the process of topic generation per application so that it might be more clear. So you see here that the LLM receives the application and the current list of candidate topics. Then it defines the topics seen in the application and matches them to the list of candidate topics. And then it makes this check, okay, all the topics seen in the document, can they be matched to the topics on the candidate list? If yes, proceed to the next document. Do not generate any topics. If no, create a new candidate topic and add it to the list, and then proceed to the next document. So this current candidate list, initially, the list of candidate topics consists of 10 so-called seed topics, and these are derived from the Danish Arts Foundation's evaluation criteria. So these seed topics normally guide the LLM towards the topic granularity that you want. But in my case, they are not just examples, they also act as anchors for the pipeline so that the final topic space includes the criteria, but most importantly also ensure that the topics generated by LLM are distinct from the existing criteria. Okay, so here you can actually see the criteria topics. So in the Danish setting, the law just requires allocation to be based on artistic quality and talent, very loosely formulated. And based on this overall criterion set by the government, the foundation actually makes their own criteria. And this is the 10 criteria that you see here, formulated as topics with a label and a description. So as you can see, the official criteria here, they include, for example, innovation in content or format, clear and original artistic idea, something about audience experience, sustainability, and so forth. So yeah, back here to the overview of the pipeline, and this was just to tell you that, so the merging here, step 2, is performed only on the generated topics, so not the criteria. We want to keep those. And then I end up with the final set of topics consisting of both the criteria and then the merged emergent topics after merging. And then this third agent scores all of these topics for each application. So I have this structured data set with topic scores that are ready to be used in regression analysis. So let's jump to some results. So I performed this first step, the topic generation, on a subsample of 800 applications. So here on the x-axis, you can see the number of documents that the LLM has seen and the number of generated topics accumulated on the y-axis. So as you can see here, the model generated quite a lot of new topics in the beginning when the candidate list of topics was already short. And then at some point, the curve flattens out, so it becomes more and more rare with the generated topics as the candidate list was expanding along the way. And finally, I ended up with 61 generated topics in total. So yes, what you see here is what I call emergent topics. So after the topic merging step, I end up with only 5 emerging topics, which you see here with the description and a label. So we have something about, art as a medium for social and political activism here at the top. We have a technological label here where we can see exploration of the integration of technology and art, including AI. We have a bunch of different topics here. And mostly, I guess, that these generated topics that the LLM produced, or also these merged versions, they have something to do with the thematics of the projects. And I think that this is not surprising, since project descriptions often also, to some extent at least, include plot descriptions of the production. And I also think that these topics kind of mirror applicants' descriptions of what they want with their productions. So, for example, to be a political commentary or protest. Okay, so the next thing was to make the LLM score each topic in each application. And here you see the topic salient scores across the years, first for the criteria topics here. So several topics here like artistic idea, societal relevance, collaboration, audience experience, and also artistic execution. They have relatively high salient scores above 0.6 across all the years. And I think that this makes sense, right? They reflect what I would say are core elements of most theater productions, whereas topics like international activities, innovation, does not take up much space in the applications on average, because not all theatre productions involve international activities or focus heavily on innovation. And we can also see here that sustainability is clearly the least emphasized criterion overall. I guess that also makes sense. Maybe it's more like a small note in the application where you say, okay, how do we relate to sustainability? I also think we can say here that the scores are quite stable over time, but both sustainability and also international activities tend to increase a little bit between the two panel cohorts. Okay, so the emergent topics here, on average, I would say they tend to have lower average scores. We can see here that performance and embodiment has the highest average salient score here. Then we can also see over time, technological and innovation arts and also philosophical and existential themes decline slightly. And we have cultural identity preservation and artistic expression and progress then increase a little bit. So I think that these shifts that we see in topic scores between the two periods might reflect some broader development, such as attention to climate and sustainability issues, more collective reflections in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. It could be debates about identity, maybe war, some tensions that likely influence artistic themes and priorities. But this is just my speculation. Okay, so just quickly here, I will also show you the distribution of the topic scores for each topic here. So we can see that the applicants are familiar with the official criteria, and typically they devote substantial space in these applications to address these core ones. So we can see local peaks here in artistic execution and artistic idea. But if we look at the bottom here for the emergent topics, they are quite more unevenly distributed, and they also have more mass in the end with the lower scores. Okay, so let's turn to the regression setup here. So this was just to show you I have 3 different regression models. So in the first one, I only include the topic scores. In the second one, I add some applicant and characteristics for the projects. And then finally, I add the interaction terms between panel and each topic to examine whether the 2 panel cohorts differ in terms of which topics they actually value. Okay, so here you see, or at least you see the top of the table with the regression results. I will skip to average marginal effects in a bit for more clear interpretation. But at least what you can see here is that the vast majority of the topic coefficients maintain their sign and overall pattern across model 1 and model 2. And then model 3 here, that's the one where I add the panel interactions. So these main coefficients here, they reflect the reference panel, which is 2018-2019. And then it's the interaction terms that actually capture the change by turning to the other panel. But maybe just a quick look here, the second part of the table. So that's the additional variables here, the applicant characteristics. So I would say that most of the patterns that I already showed you in the descriptive statistics, they turn into a significant results here in the regression model. We can see that organizations do better than individuals. We can see that targeting specifically adults or children has a positive association with being funded compared to targeting all audiences. We can also see the genres. Contemporary circus stands out as a positive associated genre, and also the text-based category has a significant and negative coefficient here. So this is the bottom of the regression table. So you can see the interaction terms that are added here in model 3. But I will actually just move on to some plots where we can actually look at these topic effects instead on the probability scale. So here we have the average marginal effects for model 2. So this is reflecting the distribution of funding in general across all 5 years. And the bars here are 90% confidence intervals for the average marginal effects. So we can see here that the most positive and significant effects is actually an emergent topic, artistic expressions and protest. We can also see that the criteria, international activities, collaboration, and also longevity also have a positive effect on funding. And also the emergent topic, philosophical and existential themes. I guess more surprisingly, maybe a few of the core criteria topics have substantial negative effects. So applications that emphasize artistic execution and artistic idea here at the bottom are actually less likely to receive funding. I think one interpretation here of this, I would say maybe counterintuitive pattern, is that once other evaluative dimensions are considered, application that goes on and on about artistic ideas alone, they do not necessarily do better. So maybe this emphasis comes at the expense of other concerns, right? So I guess the hypothesis stating that only the criteria matters and matters positively cannot be supported based on this. Then here we have the results from model 3. So we see the differences here between the two panels. So for the 2018-19 panel, that's the dark blue one. The strongest positive effect come from collaboration, and also innovation and societal relevance has a positive effect. And if we then look at the 2022 and 2024 panels, so that's the light blue, you can see some of these patterns shift. For example, we see here societal relevance, right? It suddenly turns negative. And also if we look at innovation, it suddenly becomes insignificant, and it is other stuff that actually seems to matter here for this panel. They reward international activities, for example, and also some emergent topics, artistic expressions and protest, and also philosophical and existential themes. But on this plot here, you will see that the differences in average marginal effects that are teased, in the former plot, only 2 of them actually turns into be significantly different. So that's the innovation and societal relevance shift that we see here. But I still think that the results demonstrate that the panel may value different criteria and potentially other topics as well, and provide some support for the second hypothesis that the different panels can value different topics. Okay, finally, for some concluding remarks here. So, yeah, this is the first large-scale analysis of performing art grants application, as Giorgio mentioned in the beginning. So actually also within the creative industries, this is the first look at the grant applications in that large scale. And I think that it demonstrates how textual topics and also applicant and project attributes contribute to shape the funding decisions. I also guess that the study nuances previous findings. For example, this that artistic quality as a criterion matters. Yes, but it might be different how artistic quality is understood. What criteria is it actually that is artistic quality? And it could also be different from panel to panel. So the results also extend the previous research on arm's length evaluation within the arts, here by actually testing quantitatively the alignment between formal criteria and panel practice. So I think that the result speaks to a broader debate about the functioning of such arm's length funding systems within the arts. It is a central policy concern, I would say, whether formal criteria, regardless of they are formulated by the government or more independently by the funding body, it is central to see if they succeed in steering the decision making towards what is the overall objective here. So maybe just a few notes here about it also has some methodological contributions here. So what I do here that is new is that I combine the known and established criteria topics of interest with the LLM discovered emerging topics that are data driven. It is also actually among the first empirical papers to demonstrate an application to long and complex documents, as these applications are. And it's also this scoring of the topics to generate these regression-ready variables that has not been seen in this context before. So I believe that this paper here is offering a replicable LLM pipeline that is highly adaptable to other contexts. And I also would say that this pipeline offers a potential tool for some, I would say, system-level reflection for the funding bodies. Does our system work as we intended to? Do we maybe unintentionally value some criteria or characteristics more than others? I think that this tool could be extended to other programs or funding domains with similar questions at stake. Final slide. So there is, of course, some limitations here. Of course, it must be noted here that this study only provides a snapshot of funding decisions within one program, one period, so the results may not generalize. Also, I'm unfortunately not able to distinguish between whether the difference we see between the two periods arise from differences in the panel, or if it could be time-related differences. Also, the use of LLMs, right, it requires the good prompting, and this may introduce bias And there's also some other things, but I did a lot of stuff to test it and to validate the results and see if the LLM behaves as I intended it to behave. And also, it would have been really nice to be able to take into account repeat applicants, so whether they have applied and received funding before, but unfortunately I was not able to do that. And then I also think that there is a great opportunity here. I have the CVs available, and I would really like to do a project with those in the future, and maybe also include something about writing style or other textual features. That would be nice. But I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. This is, first of all, very fascinating. I have to say that there is clearly a lot of work behind this. I'd like to congratulate you for presenting it in such a clear way to an audience that may be or not be technical. And it is a quite technical paper, especially when it comes to the LLM part and the choice of topics. So I would like to welcome questions from the floor, and I will ask questions if there are none in the meantime, but let's wait for a couple of minutes before that happens. In the meantime, while people think about questions and place questions using the Q&A function, I think you have kind of anticipated some of the questions that I had with your future directions, with two very simple bullet points. Because my understanding of the exercise is partly to try and understand whether there could be some potential bias in the way applications have been selected. I guess ideally you would like a public body issuing a call and give clear instructions what they're looking for. So in a way, having some kind of positive correlation between what people say that they're going to do and what the public wants the call to achieve is something positive from the policymaker standpoint. Of course, you will not know whether that is entirely correct, because one could argue that the policymaker doesn't necessarily know everything, and maybe the public knows more. And so there is, I think, something in terms of something positivistic to extract from the topic modeling of the grants, regardless of the similarity with the actual call. But of course, you are only observing applications to calls. So if I'm not mistaken, your methodology tries to look at this similarity, essentially looking at topic modeling using the keywords in the call as seed words. Is that correct? So you're trying to measure essentially this distance and then control for a number of characteristics.
Yeah, you can say that. I'm not sure I was quite following what you said here towards the end. That I was trying to measure some similarities between what?
Between the text that people use in order to apply to a call and the criteria of the call, right? So the closer you are to the criteria, the better it should be from the policymaker point of view.
Yeah.
That is what you're trying to measure, essentially.
Yes, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but is that necessarily something that should be considered positive, or that could simply mean that people are simply trying to appease the policymaker by mentioning a number of times certain criteria? That's one question.
Yeah.
And the other question that I have is really specific to the fact that you have this work that Karol Borjewski presented in the seminar last year. You have music competitions, and then you can look for biases. So is there anything that your work, without looking at CVs or looking at other applicant characteristics, can say about possible biases in selections? Because I think that differences across panels, in a way, should signal some form of subjectiveness in the way panels score. So is that something you can call a bias, or is that other factors that could explain those differences across panels?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it is important to say that, this study is not trying to make like a golden recipe for the best application, right? This is not the purpose, right? But I think that it is important to see, because we all know that the official criteria, they are official, so everyone knows it. So you would be kind of a fool as an applicant, right, to not write something about it. And I cannot distinguish between whether they wrote it because they think it's like a strategy to achieve funding, or if it's actually true. But I think nevertheless, so maybe I should also mention that, so the way this LLMs, they are measuring the salient scores. So that could be understood as how much space it takes up in the application. So I cannot see whether they wrote something about that it was poorly written, or if the ideas are not clearly measured or anything. So the LLM looks for, okay, do they talk about collaboration? How much do they talk about collaboration? Yeah, so I think that's quite important to get that forward. And then related to your second question,
differences across panels and bias in selection, because clearly when you then are, if you don't control for a lot of applicant characteristics or individuals, right? You beyond the organizational characteristics. Of course, when you look at individuals, that can signal a number of things. It could be individual characteristics of the person that is applying. It could be individuals. There's differences in size, and so it can signal different things. But there are a number of individual characteristics. I was just thinking about what Carol presented last year in terms of music competition and bias. It could be in the composition of the panel versus in terms of gender bias, for example. But along the same lines, your point about having somebody who's applied consistently with success in the past can be an important signal to the panel. And it's something that at present you're probably only partly controlling for, because you do have fixed effects in your model. But
I just threw out a slide here because I think I talked to the fund, of course, and they say that it is a thing that repeat applicants get funding. They do not close their eyes for that, but I could not. I didn't have a reliable variable. So I had something where they had to type in their name. So I tried to make something to see, okay, at least among these self-written names are the same names going again. And it was actually not that big a problem, I think. So you can see the mean success rate here for the repeat applicants. So those that applied 10 times, for example, right? Okay, they succeed in 4% of the applications. So it's not like it's the same people who get it over and over again. But definitely in the CVs, there would be a bunch of stuff to include here. There would be many variables that I could get from the CV that would be very nice to have here.
Look, I don't want to take more time because there are a couple of questions in the chat, and one is from Carlotta. How do you think the use of LLMs by grant applicants might change the scenario analyzed in the future, right? So you can have people actually using LLMs to help them write the grant in the first place. And the second question from Mirat is really technical. Actually, it's a couple of questions. The first one is which LLM model was actually used, and how sensitive is the LLM to change in the list of seed topics?
Yeah. Okay, so the first, I think they are already doing this. I think they are already using LLMs to write their applications, many of them. And I actually discussed it with the fund. They saw this as some kind of a consultant work, partly, right? And they were like, oh, could we take into account something about the writing style, because they didn't want that to be a factor. If you are a good writer, that should not give you funding. So that was actually, we talked about that could be a nice thing for them also to know if they unintentionally reward the writing style, for example. So the other question, I think I also have something here in the appendix. Yeah, it's super detailed, but I was under the restriction because, of course, this data is very sensitive. So I could not just go out and use an official API, use ChatGPT and just give them the application. So I had to do it in a controlled environment. So I did all the analysis on something called uCloud. It's hosted by several Danish universities. So here you can get the computational power, the GPU hours, so to speak. And then you can also apply large language models locally. So for 2 of the agents, those that actually sees the applications, I applied something GMF-free. So that was like a middle ground. It is kind of a state-of-art model, but not very big. So it can run on 1 GPU hour. So it is also costly to run this kind of analysis. You have to balance that trade-off. And then for the merging, it only sourced the topics that are going to merge. So here I could actually use GPT-4. So this was before ChatGPT 5 came out, but nevertheless quite good. So I tried to use state-of-the-art models, and I also tested. You were asking about if I changed the seed topics, and actually the literature says that it doesn't really matter. For example, these seed topics can have nothing to do with the subject of interest here. You can actually just have something. This is mainly to guide the granularity, how fine-grained the topics are. But then, of course, it can also serve a double purpose here by also saying, I want topics that are different from these because I want to see if it's something else right than the criteria that actually matters. And I did a bunch of testing, for example, with different LLMs also. I don't know if I have it here, maybe somewhere. Yes, so I tried to see, okay, different LLMs, would they score the same topic in the same application in the same way? And they actually nearly did. So I think it is quite robust. I was actually kind of surprised. So that was nice. And I also asked the LLM to spit out the quotations so that I could actually check, okay, this LLM generated some specific topic, then I could actually go and check, okay, this quote, does that actually exist in the application? I could go back, read the application. I did that for I think 20 applications where I actually double checked if it is hallucinating, because that is a big problem within the world of LLMs. But I used quite deterministic settings here regarding temperature, if any of you is into working with LLMs. So and did a lot of validation testing. So I think I was actually kind of surprised.
Yeah. Thank you, Camilla. I have a question in the chat, which is not necessarily so it's first a compliment and then it's question more general. It would be interesting to see how this plays out in different national public funding systems.
Yeah.
I guess that would be really interesting to see how it works in the UK. I don't know if you have any prior around this, or whether you think that the exercise you run is very specific to the type of grants, and maybe in the current data that you have, you clearly control for regional differences, but it may be interesting to see whether topics science actually change across regions, because there could be difference in the way, again, just like a change across panels, they could change across regions. So I don't know whether you have investigated that. It could be partly, in line with what the question was asking. I don't know what you think about that.
I just, just a thought that came to mind was right, because in the Danish case, as I said, it is actually not the government who set the criteria. It is the Danish Arts Foundation themselves. So this is basically an analysis about, okay, do they live up to their own formulated? But I think it would be even more interesting to have data from other countries with regions, stuff like that, where it is also the government that actually sets it, because that would give a more clear picture of what this study by Lutz also found, right, that they actually deviate from what the government think. I think that is very interesting. It could be a really nice method to also use on that kind of data. That would be nice.
Excellent. I have a question which is related and from Michael, and then I'll go to our very Tom Kyle Jones. But have you made Arts Council England aware of your research? They would be very interested in the application of your work. I know that there have been some discussions where you were around, but probably I think it would be interesting to explore, right, if you had the appetite to maybe connect Arts Council England and see. I don't know whether you would have the appetite to do that, but in China, it's very interesting. And I think it's related to this question Tom is asking, if when you spoke to the founders about your results, if you did, were they surprised at all, or what did they feel about the approach to assessing applications?
Yes, I went and presented the results to them, and I think they were a little bit surprised about something, but most importantly for me, they validated some of the results. For example, if you can still see this slide, right, they told me, okay, specifically there was something about that they pronounced an interest in valuing projects that dedicated something to sustainability. Yes, okay, I can see then applicants started to write more about sustainability in their reports. So at least they gave me a clue that the LLM was correct in how they scored the projects. It made sense in reality. But I think
Sorry, on this point, were
yeah.
they surprised that sustainability was scoring so low? Because I'm slightly surprised it does.
That this score is low?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what explains this is exactly that these scores are how much space it is, because I think it would be weird, to have page up and page down about sustainability. It is more like a side note than they describe, the artistic ideas and stuff like that. That takes more space. So
but is there any way for the funder to signal to the applicants that one topic might be more salient than others in one call? Or do they do that? Because clearly, if they signal sustainability as not particularly important, this would make sense. But if instead they signal sustainability as being important, it's really this probably relative importance, right? So, but it is, it seems to be relatively less important than other ones.
Yeah, so maybe I should mention, you can see the criteria here. This is my formulation of the criteria. I did it together with the fund, so they approved of it. But in reality, this is a long website, with many points for each of these written in, the Danish Arts Foundation, but in a very messy way. So first of all, I was also talking to them about maybe you should have more transparency in your criteria. First of all, it was also an exercise for them to actually try to formulate it as short as this. But regarding what you were talking about before, so this, they can make, each panel made their own criteria. So this was like common ground. So they are like differences in the criteria. So they particularly wrote this last panel that sustainability and also international activities was a primary concern for them. They have like a little strategic paper that is attached to the guidelines, right?
I see.
So yeah, but it was nice to see that actually mattered, and that applicants see that and respond to that. Whether it is rewarded, that was something else. So I think that was interesting, right?
There is another question from Tom, which is, would it be possible to run a similar exercise on the evaluations of the projects which were selected? Could the success of the choices be determined at all using some standardized criteria?
Yeah, that's a good question. So on the evaluations of the projects, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, Tom.
I think in your case, you're looking at the differences between funded and non-funded. So whether there is any science between those that probably they were selected for funding, I think that's really the question. There is another one from Daniel in the Q&A, which is he's saying that he might have missed the earlier part, but how much do these funders use applicant tracking systems that early screen applications, if any, like HR companies do? Is there anything like that is going on?
No, not that I'm aware of, at least. No.
And then there is one that's probably the final question, given that we are approaching the hour, by Sarah. Very interesting work, Camille. Is there any role played by competition, which is the number of applications for each round of funding? Can you also observe if the panel takes into account EDI or geographical distributional concerns? And I think that's similar to what I was suggesting previously, right, in terms of differences, distance from Copenhagen, I don't know, for example, capital city. And also, isn't the fundamental problem here supply and demand? That's from Michael. So these are two separate questions, one from Sarah, one from Michael.
Yeah. So that was nice. That could be nice to maybe take into account the actual number of applications. I didn't do that. But I think, at least I checked it in the descriptives, and it was not that big differences. It's the same amount they have available. There is a slightly increase in number of applicants, but maybe within each genre it would matter. But yeah.
And I think the other thing I want to ask really is that there is some difference and some change over time which again you kind of glazed over a bit, but I was curious to understand because some of the changes were quite interesting in terms of what was changing in terms of reducing the probability, and I was curious to know your interpretation around these changes. But a lot of the criteria or the settings stays the same, but then a couple of them actually decrease their importance over time. But in the post-COVID, if I'm not mistaken.
Was it this, or is it the topic
the
scores?
change, I think, was probably the change.
So these two plots?
No, there was another chart with differences over time. The differences is one. So innovation and societal relevance.
Yeah.
I think that is interesting. It'd be interesting to understand what happens if.
But I think that this one maybe should be understood together with the, this one, because at least in my interpretation, I would say that this artistic expression and protest, if you look at the descriptions of it, it is kind of a sub theme to the societal relevant stuff. So I think that maybe they, so this is negative, right? But is that because they reward very specific kind of societal relevance? Does that make sense? So I think there is something here that I would like to really dive into.
Some correlation between the criteria, I think, probably that. It's almost multidimensional, but you're looking at them as if they were all separate. So there could be maybe clusters across. That could be something interesting to explore, where there are clusters.
And definitely also, maybe some interactions of some of them, right? That would do something maybe to all of also these negative effects. Maybe if it's an interaction with something else, how would that look, right?
Excellent. So I think that's all in terms of questions from the audience, if I'm not mistaken. So can I very quickly, start from thanking you, Camille, for your presentation and engagement with our audience. This has massively enriched our understanding of arts funding, especially in performing arts and in Denmark. But I think more generally, I think there seems to be a lot of interest to explore these issues also in the UK. And it would be great once you've finalized your work if there could be some transferability of methods and approaches. And clearly, it's nice to see how you're developing such a nice micro approach and using some recent tools in semantic analysis. Now, as just in terms of progressing towards the end of the seminar, I'd like to remind everybody that the seminar will be uploaded on our YouTube page for asynchronous consumption soon, so that we have a lot of people connecting from all over the world and then viewing the seminar later. I would like to thank also our partners at the HRC and the Creative Pack team, which has been, as usual, fantastic for their support in the organization of the seminar. I will mention in particular Tom, Simon, and Emily, but everybody really should be praised. And we are currently working on the series of seminars for the new year. And we're going to announce the new seminar series hopefully soon. We have a very exciting list of new speakers for 2026 coming up soon. So please keep an eye on the webpage and our newsletter. So I think that is all from us. Thank you again, Camille. Congratulations on your work. It's great to see the progress that you've made over the last year and a half, is it? Yes, amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.